Okay, hello and welcome. Thank you all for attending today, and thank you for allowing us to serve you. I'm Renee with Admiral Consulting Group. Before we get started, a few things to note. At the end of the presentation, we will do a Q&A session and take as many questions as we have time for. You can ask questions using the question panel on your attendee interface. You simply expand the panel, type in your question, and then click send. Also, I am recording this webcast so that you'll be able to refer to it as many times as you want. And I will also be sending out the slide deck in a PDF format after the presentation. Okay, so let's get started. Today, we're going to show you how to make some simple customizations or personalizations to Dynamics GP using a couple of different modules, those modules being the modifier module and the report writer module. And these customizations will include things like moving fields and labels, hiding fields and labels, renaming labels, and we're going to look at this both on Windows as well as reports. And the presentation will take a little bit under 30 minutes, and then we'll have up to 30 minutes for questions after that. And before we actually look at performing the customizations, we need to touch on 4 or 5 topics that are shown on this slide. And then after that, we're going to look at 2 window customization examples and 1 report customization example. And the examples that we're going to go through are fairly simple, but I know that simple can be subjective. Some of you may be very comfortable making these types of customizations, and some of you will be very uncomfortable with it. But regardless of your comfort level with that, know that after today's presentation, you'll at least know exactly what can be done with the tools. And first, I want to jump into licensing. Okay, in order to make customizations, you need to own or have licenses for the modifier and the report writer modules. Now, if you're on GP 2013 or later, you have the licenses. They are automatically included as part of the starter pack, which you would all have if you're on 2013 or later. Now, if you are on GP 2010 or earlier, you may or may not be licensed for the customization tools, the report writer and the modifier. If you are not, the only way that you can get licensed is to upgrade to a later version of GP. Because 2010 is no longer supported, Microsoft won't sell you or license you additional modules. If you're on GP 2010 and you're not sure if you own the products, then just email me after this and I'll take a look at your account on the Microsoft portal and let you know if you're licensed or not. Next, in order to access the modifier and report writer, which you need access to make the customizations, you're going to need to be granted explicit rights to those modules. Now, if you're a power user already, and I know some of you are, you'll already have access to the modifier and the report writer. If you know the SA password, or if you're a power user and you know the GP system password, and the GP system password is not a password you use to log into GP. The GP system password, if you're not familiar with it, is a password that you need to know to get into certain administrative screens of GP. So if you know that password and you know the SA password, you will be able to grant rights to various GP logins, meaning users, including your own. If you don't know the SA password, and the GP system password, then someone on your IT team or Admiral is going to have to assign these rights for you. Now, the 3 security tasks that you need rights to are shown on this slide. And after you're granted rights to these tasks, and if you're still not able to access the modification tools for whatever reason, just let us know and we'll be able to help. So here is the list of steps that someone needs to go through to assign the rights to the security tools. And this looks like a long list. Now keep in mind that I am sending you this deck, so you don't need to take notes on this. Let me just walk you through this process verbally, and then I'm going to go ahead and show you how this is done. So you need to log into GP as SA. You need to go to the administrative area. Then you need to select the menu option for security roles. Then you need to create a new security role and give it a name. You can name it anything you want and also give it a description, which can be anything you want. After you've created the new role ID and name, you need to mark those 3 security tasks that I showed earlier and that are also shown on this slide. And then you save the role screen. Save and close it. Then you need to assign that role to any users that you want to give access to the customization tools. And you do that by going to User Security, typing in the username and the company that you want to grant security for, and then you mark the new role that you created in the steps above, and then you're done. So let me show you what that looks like. I'm going to jump over to GP. I'm going to click on the administration area. Up here on the top, probably on the top left of your screen as well, you'll see an option for setup and then for security roles. And this is where you have to supply that GP system password. Okay, the security role window will open. You need to give this new role an ID. I'm just going to call it Customizer. And I'm going to make the name Customizer and the description Customizer as well. And then down in the bottom of the screen is a list of all the security tasks that exist in GP. And we're just interested in the ones that begin with admin and system. And again, they were on the slide and they're right here. So modifier, report writer, and customization maintenance. So there's the new role that has rights to those 3 items, and click Save. Next, we go to user security. Again, provide the system password. Either do the lookup or type in the user ID that you want to grant rights for and select the company as well. Now in the bottom of this window, you're seeing a list of all the security roles, and you will see the new security role that we created called Customizer, and just mark that. And now this user, when they're logged into this company, is assigned to this security role, which means they can do customization of reports and windows. Now, if you're logged in as the same user that you're granting rights to, you will get this message. And that just means that since you're logged in as the same user, you need to log out and log back again in order for those changes to take place. All right, so that's security. Next, let's talk about backups. Prior to making any report or window customization, it's always a very, very good idea to do a backup first. You really should not make any customizations unless that backup has occurred. The steps for making that backup are shown on this slide, and I'm going to walk you through that process in a second. And this is just one way to do the backup. Another way to do the backup is actually to back up some files on the hard drive just using Windows Explorer. But I'm not going to go over that today, but just know that there's more than one way to do this. So I'm going to go into GP again, and I'm going to select at the top of the window the Microsoft Dynamics GP option. And I'm going to go into Tools, then into Customize. And you will notice now that my user has rights to the report writer and modifier. They're no longer grayed out. And I also have rights to customization maintenance. So I want to go into customization maintenance. And this is going to open up the customization maintenance window, and it's going to show a row for every single window or report that's been customized. And you can see in my system, I've got quite a few that have been customized. And what you want to do is select every single one of these items. And you can do that by holding the Shift key and then click on Export. Now what this is going to do is it's going to take all those customizations and wrap them up in a file that's going to be saved on your hard drive. And on this window, you need to specify the file name, just like if you were saving an Excel file or a Word file. The name can be anything you want. And then you want to specify where you're going to save that file. And I'm just going to put it on my desktop and give it a random name. And you'll see when I click Save, you'll notice another dialog is going to come up showing that it's saving all the customizations, and then you're done. So that's how you can back up the customizations before making new customizations. Now, if you need to recover to the state just prior to your making new customizations, you can use that same window. Let me just bring it up again. and import that file that you exported, and that'll bring your customizations to the state they were at the point in time when you made the backup. So that's how you can recover from any problems. Scope of customizations. Scope of customizations refers to which users will be affected by customizations that you perform. So for example, if you hide a field on a window, will that field be hidden for all users, or will it be hidden just for you? Or will it be hidden just for users that are on your same physical computer or use your same physical computer? So if you're in a remote desktop environment or a Windows terminal server environment or Citrix, those are all kind of the same, most likely all users will be affected by any customizations that you perform. There are some exceptions to that. If your company has GP installed on each individual computer, then customizations are likely local to that computer. And again, there are exceptions to that. And that latter case means that anybody who logs in to your computer would be affected by those customizations. Also know that you do have the ability to specify customizations on a user-by-user basis, but that's a little beyond the scope of this presentation. If you need to have different customizations for different people, let your consultant know and we'll tell you how to do that. Let's say that this person needs to see the AP window one way, this person needs to see it another, and this person needs to see it another. You can do that. Now, if you're unsure, if this slide's causing some confusion, if you're unsure of your environment and just exactly how the customizations are going to affect other users, then just let us know and we'll look at your system and be able to make a determination in a minute as to what the scope of the customizations is going to be. Also, one more quick note, and that's not on this slide. So what if you've made customizations and you don't want them anymore for whatever reason? You can always go back to stock at any point. You always have the ability to go back to GP right out of the box. The changes that you make using the modifier and report writer don't affect the actual GP program itself. All these customizations live in a separate file called a dictionary, and that dictionary can be cleared easily if necessary. You also have the ability to quote unquote remove any customizations just by adjusting security as well, and we can take a look at this in a minute. Okay, so let's look at something that's a little bit more fun, or actually look at some customizations. We're going to look at first making some changes to Windows, and I'm going to use the payables transaction entry window for the first example because most of you probably use that window or someone in your company uses that window. And I'm going to do four things. First, I'm going to hide some fields. Next is I'm going to move some fields. I'm then going to rename a field. And then I'm going to show you how to change the tab order on the window. And here are the steps that you would go through to do such a customization. And I'm not going to show all of these today, but what you want to do is first back up, going through the steps that we just went through. You also want to make sure that there are no users in GP. If you don't do that, you may make the customizations and you won't be able to save them. Or when you do the save, it may corrupt the dictionary files where the customizations are stored. And if that happens, you may not be able to start GP and you'll have to give us a call to recover from that. So you want to make sure that there are no users logged into GP. Next, what you want to do is open the window as you normally would. So open the window you want to customize as you normally would. So we're going to open the payables transaction entry window. Next, after you've opened the window, you're going to select Tools, Customize, Modify Current Window from the toolbar. You're going to make all the changes to the form or the window. Then you're going to save the changes. And then you need to set security for the customizations. So we've talked about security earlier, but the security we talked about was granting people rights to make customizations. This refers to granting rights people to the customizations so that they can see them. And then last, you're going to want to view and verify your customizations. All right, let's go into GP and do this. So since we're modifying the payables transaction entry window, we have to go to the purchasing area. Then we're going to go to the transaction entry window and open it up. And then we're going to click on Tools and Customize and Modify Current Window. By the way, your screen may or may not look like this with the ribbon on the top. There is a setting in user preferences that let you change the look of the top of the screen. If your screen doesn't look like this, you're going to have a menu instead. And what you're going to want to do is select from the menu, you're going to select Tools, Customize, Modify Current Window. So let me go Tools, Customize, Modify Current Window. Don't click Modify. Make sure you click Modify Current Window. And what this is going to do is it's going to open up the window in a design view. And a lot of stuff is going on here. There's a lot of stuff that you actually don't need to worry about. So just kind of follow this from a, kind of a cookbook perspective, just following these exact steps and you'll be okay. You can ignore the colorful parts of the screen and just focus on this section here that looks like the PM transaction window. All right, so the first thing we want to do is hide some fields. On the bottom right of the payables transaction entry window, you've got these fields for cash, check, credit card, and terms discount taken. And a lot of times customers just don't use those fields at all. So I'm going to show you how you can hide those. So what I've done is I've clicked on the first field, the cash field. And now I'm going to hold down the control button on my keyboard and I'm going to select the next field below it, the check field, and the next field below that, the credit card field, and the next field below that, the terms taken field. And it may be hard to see on your screen, but there's little dots around all the fields showing that all four have been selected. Now what you want to do is you want to find the other window that's open that says properties on it. This is the properties window. And at the bottom of this window, there is a property called visible. And you can see that that property is set to true. And what I'm going to do is set that property to false, meaning invisible. So now what I've done is I've set all four of those fields to be invisible. And now keep in mind, again, we're still in the designer mode. And the fields they didn't actually disappear in designer mode. They never do in designer mode, but they changed the way they look. So because they look different than the other fields, that's a clue that they're now hidden. You can also tell if they're hidden just by looking, clicking on a field, then looking at the property down here where it says visible is false. Okay, now when we look at this form outside of designer view in the regular GP view, those fields will be hidden, and we'll see that in a minute. Okay, next let me show you how to move a field on a window. I'm going to move the PO number field and its label. So here's the PO number field label. I've clicked on it. Again, I'm holding the control button on my keyboard and I'm selecting the actual PO data field itself. And then I'm just going to click on those and drag them down. I'm going to drag them down to that part of the window. So the field move is now done. Next, I'm going to show you how to change a label. So up here you can see the label on the voucher number field says voucher number, and I'm going to change that to internal invoice number. And how you do that is you have another window over here called the toolbar. Unfortunately, you can't read the whole title of the window. It just says to. It's cut off, but this is the toolbar, or toolbox rather. And on this toolbox, you're going to want to click on the capital A. That's the text tool. And then click on the label that you want to change. And you'll notice it'll highlight the text. And then I'm going to type in the new label. And I'm done. So I have changed the label, moved the fields, and hidden some fields. So we go ahead and just save these changes now. To save the changes, you click on the X on the designer window, and it's going to ask you if you want to save the changes. And I'm going to save. And at this point, you're still in the designer. The top of the screen says Microsoft Dynamics GP, but obviously this isn't regular GP. You're in the designer. There's two ways to get back into GP normally. One is you can just close this and then restart GP and sign in. Or the more easy way is to select File from the menu and then Microsoft Dynamics GP. That will pop you into GP without having to log in. Now I'm going to go back down into Purchasing, go back into Transaction Entry, and lo and behold, the changes are not showing. So if I go back to my slide deck, we've basically done everything through step 6. So we didn't set the security yet for the customization, so that's why we're not seeing the customization yet. In order to set security for the customization, you have to go through these steps. You have to go to Modified Forms and Reports. You have to look up an ID for Modified Forms and Reports. There's usually only one, so this is a real no-brainer. You have to select the type of object that we modified. Since we modified a window and not a report, we're going to select Window. And then we have to mark the appropriate form that has been customized. So let me walk you through that. First, let me close the window. So I'm going to go to Administration again, Modified Forms and Reports. Once again, we have to supply the system password. I have to look up the ID, and again, there's only one, so usually there's only one, so this is a no-brainer. Select the type to Windows, since we modified a window just now, the Payables Transaction Entry window. And what you're going to see now on the bottom of this screen is a list of the modules. Since we modified the Payables Transaction window, we want to go into Purchasing. This is a list of all the customized windows on my system. The one we're interested in granting rights to is Payables Transaction Entry. So I'm going to go in here, and you'll notice that Microsoft Dynamics GP is selected. That means that's the stock window that's being shown. Since we want to show the modified window, we mark that, and then we click Save. So now we can go back to Purchasing, go back to Transaction Entry, and we see the modified form. You'll notice the label is changed, the PO number field is moved, and all of the fields on the bottom right have been changed. Okay, next let's talk about changing the tab order on a window. So we're going to go back into the design view by going to Tools, Customize, Modify Current Window. So we're back in the designer again. And from the menu, you're going to select Layout, Set Tab Sequence. And you'll notice when I did that, one of the fields on the window turned blue. So let me just do it again. I'll turn it off so you can see it. There's no blue fields. I set tab sequence, and I see a blue field. That blue field that immediately lights up when you make that menu option is the very first field that's going to have focus when you open the window. If you want a different field to be the focus, you'll just double click on it, and that'll be the first field. Now in this window, it makes sense for the voucher number field to be the first field, so I'm just going to leave that. So now to set the next field you go to, what you do is you hit the tab button on your keyboard, and it's going to go to whatever field is currently set as the next field. Notice it jumped down to the purchase order number field. Well, I don't want the purchase order number field to be the next field. I want the document type number to be the next field. So I simply double click on the document type field. Now that is set as the next field that'll be tabbed into after the voucher number field. Okay, so now we want to set the next field. Hit the tab button again, and notice it's going back down to the purchase order number field again by default. Now we don't want to go to the purchase order number field next. We want to go to the description field next. So I'll double click there. And next I want to go to the batch number field. So I'm going to hit tab, and notice again it's going to the purchase order number field, but I want to go to the batch field, so I'm going to double click there. So what I just did is I set the tab sequence to be invoice number, document type, description, then batch number. Also note that if you don't want a field to be part of the tab sequence at all, if you always want it to be skipped, you would just select the field. For example, let's say the PO number field. And I'll show you how to do it. Let me turn off set tab sequence. So I'm done setting the sequences. Now, if I want to skip a field like the PO number field, I can just click on the PO number field, and then back over on my property window, there is a property called tab stop, and you'll notice that it's set to true. If I just set that to false, then for this field, the purchase order number field, it's no longer going to be a tab stop at all. It's always going to be skipped. And you can also skip buttons and everything else. Okay, so that's how you set the tab order and set tab stops. So you want to save this by closing the window again and clicking Save. And then again, you can go back to regular GP by closing this and logging in again, or just by selecting File and Microsoft Dynamics GP. So we'll go back into that purchasing window one more time and look at the tab order. Notice it went to the first field and already gave me a number. Then it went to the document number field. And then if I hit tab, it's going to description, then batch number, and then wherever next. I didn't go any farther than that. But notice it's not going to, I just cycled through all the fields. It's not hitting the PO number field at all. All right, so let's go back to our deck here and talk about Windows customization number 2. And in this one, I'm going to use the customer transaction inquiry. The slide says entry, but really I want to look at the inquiry window. And we're going to make some adjustments to the grid, which is a little bit more complicated. And what I want to do is make the document date field visible by default. So let me go over here to the sales area and then to inquiries, and then to transactions by customer, and I'm going to bring up the transactions for a customer. And on this inquiry window, you'll notice that by default, it's not expanded, it's compressed. And when it's compressed by default, you'll notice that you don't see the document date field. You do see the document origin field over here on the left, which to me is not real useful. So what I want to do is I basically want to flip the origin field and the document date field. So I just expanded the grid, and let's just look at one of these rows here. So look at this invoice. On the top row, we have the document origin that says open, and then below that we have the date. And if we collapse it, we only see the top one, which is the origin. And I want to flip that around so that we see the document date by default. Okay, so what are the steps that we need to go through? We need to back up customizations again, always. We need to make sure no users are in GP. We open the window as we normally do, so we go into the inquiry screen and open it up like I just did. We select Tools, Customize, Modify Current Window. Then we first make changes to the grid labels, and then we make changes to the grid fields themselves. Let me just bring this, here's a screenshot of that window again. So we want to modify the labels. The labels are the top part of the grid. These are just static text that describe what's showing in the grid. And we want to swap these so that everything is neat and clean. So the document date is on the top and origins on the bottom. And then step number 6 is we actually want to flip the grid data itself. Okay, and then we want to save the changes, set security again, and then view the customizations. All right, so I'm on the window. I'm going to Tools, Customize, Modify Current Window. And again, we're seeing the window in design mode, and you can ignore the colorful areas on the bottom. And again, the first thing we want to do, I'm just going to drag this over here again, is we want to flip the labels on the top of the grid. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this document date grid and drag it out of the way temporarily, take the origin grid and drag it down, and then put the document date on top. So we are done modifying the top. Now we want to actually modify the way the grid presents data and have it present the date instead of the origin. So I'm going to double click on this. And this is where it does get a little bit confusing. What the screen is showing now is basically one row or one record, what one record will look like on the grid. And I'm going to go over here and to layout and click this option that says show field names, so it might make a little bit more sense to you. So I'm going to bring this over here too. So by default, the origin is on the top and the document date is on the bottom. I want to flip those. So I'm just going to take this document date and move it out of the way. I'm going to move the origin down to where the date was, and I'm going to put the document date up on the top. And I'm going to close the grid and click Save. And I'm going to close the main window and click Save. And then I'm going to go back into GP. And I already set the security because I didn't want to waste your time going through those steps. And go into Sales. Go into Transactions by Customer, bring up that customer again, and now you can see on this grid that we're seeing the document date by default, and that we're seeing the origin below it, and the labels on the grid make sense. They're stacked properly. And by the way, another common customization on this window is to take this amount remaining field, which you can see is not showing by default on the grid, and actually drag it over here to the right of the document amount, so that as soon as you come into this window, it's really easy for you to tell if a document has an outstanding balance on it. Okay, so that is modifying a grid on a window. Now we're going to talk about modifying a report, and we're going to use the sales invoice for this. And this is a lot like modifying the windows. What we're going to do is move the page number field on the invoice. We're going to change a label. In particular, we're going to change the label that says bill to and change it to invoice to. And then we're also going to remove a field called master number, which is not terribly useful. So here's the steps we're going to go through. We're going to back up the customizations, make sure no users are in GP, click the modify, print the report to the window as normal, click the modify button, make our changes, save, set security, and then again, view the customizations. So let's go back over to GP again. We are in the sales area. We're going to click on sales transaction entry because that's where you need to go to print an invoice. I'm going to bring up the last invoice in the system. Click the print button to print the invoice to the window or the screen. Here is the invoice. We're going to change this label. We're going to move this field down, the page number field and its label down, and we're going to remove this master number field over here. So if you have rights, click the modify button, and this is going to open up the report in design view. And this is, again, one of those areas it can be a little daunting looking at this. We're not going to talk about modifying the detail section of the report. We're just going to focus on the header for now. So I'm going to come over here first and change this label that says bill to. And I'm going to click on the toolbox text tool again, and then just click on the label that I want to change and change it to invoice to. And we're done with that modification of changing the label. Next, we want to do a field move. I'm going to click on the page label and just drag it down randomly and take the page number data field and pull that down as well. And then last, I'm going to take the master number field over here. And this may be a little hard to see, but there's a master number label. I'm just going to delete it, and a master number field, and I'm just going to delete that. And then I'm going to close this and save. Go back into GP. And again, I've already set the security here, so we don't need to do that. I'll go back into the sales transaction entry window, bring up that same invoice, print it, and you can see our label has changed here, our page number has been moved down, and we removed the master number information from the screen. Okay, so that is customizing the report. So as a way of review, actually before review, just a couple points about customizations. These were very simple. We didn't touch on adding new fields to windows and reports, which can be done. We didn't talk about adding event code. That wasn't my original invitation, but I thought I would keep this a little bit simpler. But there is a way to add something called event code, which probably doesn't mean that much to people that are not programmers, but just know that it's very easy to do things like evaluate data that a user has entered on a window, and then after the evaluation has been made, to do something. So for example, if a user selects a certain customer, we could pop up a message that says, this is a VIP customer, make sure that you address this, this, and that. There really is no limit to what you can do with that event code capability. And there really isn't a limit to the number of fields that you can add to reports and windows as well. So there's a lot more that you can do than we looked at today. But what we did talk about today was licensing and security requirements. We talked about backing up. We talked a little bit about the scope of customizations, and we looked at a couple different ways to modify windows and reports. So it's quite a bit for an introductory presentation. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and open it up for questions. And again, you can just click on your question pane and just type in your question. I'll read it out to the group and we'll go from there. And I'll wait I'll wait a whole 5 minutes for questions. And if there are no questions, feel free to jump off. There's no more content. And again, I will be sending out the recording, and I will be sending out a PDF as well. Okay. I have a question from Melody. It says, does the customization change in more than one entity? Let's see what company you're with to properly answer this question. You're with CMA. Melody, are you using multi-entity management from Binary Stream? Okay. So then the answer to that question is they don't have to. So I'm going to go back into GP, and I'm going to go back to one of the areas I went to earlier, and that's right here under Modified Forms and Reports. Actually, that's not where I want to go. I want to go to User Security. I'm going to bring up the same user that I set security for before. Now, remember that in order for someone to see a customization, they have to be granted rights to the customization. Okay, sorry about that. It looks like I had some internet problems there for a second. Hopefully you're still there. So let me come back. You should see my screen. This is the answer to Melody's question about whether it applies to more than one. So when you're setting up security, remember you have to set security for each customization, and you do define that by company. So yes, you can define it by company in that regard. And there's also a couple of other ways that you can do it using alternate form and report ID dictionaries attached to the company. If you need more information on that, we can take that offline. Okay, I have another question from Melody. The modification you made on the sales invoice for the master number, can the sales order and pick tickets for this? Yes, they can be. Any report, any native report can be modified. And also report templates, Word templates can be modified as well, which is a little bit more difficult, but they can all be modified. So there. And I think that's it. So we still have Angelica on. Any questions, Angelica or Jim or Valley? Looks good. Okay. Well, again, thanks again for attending. I hope it was helpful. And again, I hope it at least gave you an idea of the capabilities that are there that your IT people can do if you're not comfortable doing it, or that we can do for you relatively quickly. And I will send out the PDF and the presentation shortly. Thanks a lot, everyone. Bye-bye.